Today's beekeeping field day, and it is my absolute pleasure to be announcing our latest publication to you today. So that is our egg guide on honeybee nutrition and fat bees, not skinny bees. So this is the publication here, and I would like to take the opportunity to tell you a little bit more about how this publication actually came about. And it started a little while ago with an idea, and I think all good things start with an idea, and it's kind of a little bit similar to anyone that appreciates gardening in this room. It starts with a little seed, but that little seed needs the right conditions to be able to sprout. And it was until at the beginning, or a little bit earlier this year, about end of April or May, where everyone has been starting to talk about nutrition. So that really pleased me, because honeybee nutrition is my background, and that's what I'm actively working in, and also doing research in honeybee nutrition. But it's also very timely from the point of view that we are now dealing with Varroa as well, and what it now means to have to manage nutrition much more carefully than we did in the past. So it is a very timely publication, and at that point I've gotten together with Jennifer LaFont. She's sitting right here. Jennifer, do you want to stand up for a moment, please? So that's Jennifer. We got together, and okay, so I sent this email to Jennifer, and then it didn't take very long, because Jennifer is very quick, and she sent a reply, because I said to her, there's something that I would like to talk to you about. And she goes, okay, so what's that? And I said, well, you know how we've been writing about the nutritional requirements of bees? We've been writing about how to detect if there is a nutritional problem inside of the colony. And we talk about what beekeepers can do in terms of supplementary feeding for nectar and for pollen. And we talk about the economics of it all. But there's one chapter that's actually missing. And Jennifer says, okay. And there's this moment of silence, and I go, Jennifer, is everything okay? And she goes, yes, I'm just picking myself up off the floor. I fell off my chair. And I said, and at this point, I really hope that this was a metaphor for saying, oh, okay, do we actually have time for this? And that Jennifer didn't actually fall off the chair. But what it meant was that we now had to include a different, or another chapter, which we managed just fine, because we had set ourselves a very tight timeline to be able to get this egg guide not only written, but also proofread and edited and printed to be able to present it to you today. So that was the goal that we set ourselves. And with that, I really want to say a huge thank you to Jennifer, but also everyone else that has been involved in making this happen, from our graphics designer Jessica Green to the Tocal delivery team, also to Doug Somerville and his previous presentation, Fat Bees, Skinny Bees, that this book is based on. And finally, also the printing shop, because they personally delivered our books only last week, so that we could present to you the book today. And it is available just outside on our store if you're interested. Now, for the rest of today's presentation, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about the key steps in managing honeybee nutrition. This is only going to be a very quick overview, and I'm very happy to talk to anyone afterwards if you've got any questions, or if you have any personal experience with anything. And the first question that we always need to ask ourselves is, why is nutrition actually important? And it is, in fact, a very quick answer, because honeybees are not very different to us, really, in the sense of them also having nutritional requirements that need to be met. So it's really a very simple answer, because if they do not have access to the nutrients that they need, then their immunity goes down, they become more susceptible to disease, and so on. So the next question is, what are the actual nutritional requirements of honeybees? And in some ways, honeybees have two major nutritional requirements, and that is nectar that they then ripen into honey, and that meets their carbohydrate requirements, and then also pollen. And I usually get a bit excited about pollen for the reason being that pollen is super interesting because it not only provides all other nutrients to honeybees in terms of lipids or fats, protein, amino acid, minerals and vitamins, but our pollens that are out there, they also vary in their nutritional quality a lot. And not every plant species produces the same quantity of pollen either. So there's really a lot that we can learn about the different types of pollen that honeybees use and that are available to them, and in terms of understanding what the bees get from those different types of pollens. And then we have our heroes of the colony, as I like to call them. They are the nurse bees, because the nurse bees are the ones that take whatever resources that the bees are bringing into the hive, so that could be pollen, could be nectar, and they then have to really process that food to be able to produce a jelly that they then feed to other colony members. So whether that is developing brood, whether that is the queen or drones and other colony members as well. So we then really need to know what do the bees have available to them in the environment in terms of floral resources. And that is something that's not so easy to answer, for the reason being that, as I was saying, different plant species provide different food resources for bees, and it also depends very largely on the environment that we're in. So someone that's, so let's say, based around here to someone that's based a few hours away or along the coast or inland, you have very different floral resources that may be available to bees. And also, to some extent, I think we have a big responsibility in taking care of that, because we are the ones that decide where we place our beehives, which then determines what the bees actually can forage on as well. And then, of course, there is the seasonal effect. So to learn a lot more about resources, and between colleagues we refer to this book written by Doug Somerville on honey and pollen flora of southeastern Australia as the Floral Bible, because it really has a lot of information about not only how valuable different plant species are to honeybees, but also gives you detail about how much of a crop or nectar are bees collecting of different species, and the quality and quantity of pollen that bees are collecting as well. So have a look at that. Some of you might already be familiar with it, but that's a very good resource to have. So what are the nutritional qualities of pollen? I keep on coming back to that point, and we've already touched on that a fair bit. But to give you an idea, so this is pollen that I've trapped last year sometime, and that was only one point in time. So you can see that the bees have collected a whole variety of different pollen sources, which tells me that the bees had access to at least 3 or 4 different types of pollen in that instance. And that's usually what we're looking for, because if there is any type of pollen that is somewhat low in a nutrient or might even be deficient, then hopefully by eating a variety of food, they will be able to still meet their nutritional needs. So that is certainly something that everyone can watch out for in terms of what colors of pollen are the bees, for example, collecting? What are they storing inside of the hive? Are they storing excess or not? And so yeah, they are some indications. And the color can also be a little bit of a giveaway as to what kind of type of pollen it might be. So how do bees regulate the nutrition? And in some ways, it's actually truly remarkable how bees do regulate nutrition, because it's so tightly regulated within a colony. And if you think about it, we've got thousands of individuals in this hive that now need to communicate, to tell each other what is actually happening in the environment, what do we need to be able to feed everyone, and then adjust that so quickly according to what is happening in the environment. So that could either be things starting or stopping to flower, that could be floral resources switching off because we just had a rain event or something else happened. So it's really, bees have to be very quick in adjusting to their needs, but also to environmental factors. And so this is just a bit of a diagram to summarize what's going on inside and outside of the hive. And you can see we've also got our storer bees. So when the bees are collecting nectar or water, for example, that is getting passed on to another type of bee, or usually what we would call mid-aged bee, and they then store that inside of the hive. They ripen the nectar into honey and so on. The water doesn't really ever get stored as such, but bees temporarily might put some of it in cells, or they spread it over the comb, and then they also use their wings and create a evaporative cooling effect that allows the bees to maintain a constant temperature within the hive. And then, of course, we also, as we mentioned or talked about a little bit earlier, we have our nurse bees that are regulating the nutritional needs of everyone. And the queen, of course, adjusts to it too, because if she isn't getting fed as much, she might not lay 2,000 eggs as what her capacity somewhere around that can be during a productive season. So she will lay fewer eggs, nurse bees cannot provide that food, and they may also sacrifice eggs or young larvae to be able to still feed older developing brood. So the bees themselves have mechanisms that they can use or rely on to be able to regulate nutrition inside of a hive. And then we also have our drones that are around seasonally that are also being fed by the nurse bees. So I just want to briefly touch on water, because it is something very topical right now as we are heading into what is looking like a hot summer. So bees do have a need for water, and generally speaking, honeybees can get or meet their nutritional needs for water just from nectar alone. But once the temperatures especially reach above 30 degrees, that is when the bees need a lot of water to be able to cool the hive. So one important thing is to provide, if you are putting out water for bees because it's not available naturally from a stream or somewhere else, within 200 meters, is to provide the bees with, it could be a tub or some kind of container, or you can see some examples here, that also have some kind of a landing platform for the bees so they don't drown in the container. So that could be some floating device, could be sticks, could be rocks, just something for the bees to actually be able to land on. Talking about water and evaporation and cooling, there is one other very important point that I want to talk about today, and that is in connection with ventilation. So if you imagine a colony that has a very narrow entrance, and some of you might be reducing entrances during wintertime, for example, if that hive is now trying to actually cool down its cool down the temperatures to be able to maintain those 35 degrees in the presence of brood, they are having to circulate air through the entrance. So there's two types of fanning bees, and one group of fanning bees, and you can see it in the image a little bit here, where the bees all line up in one direction. Usually their abdomens are lifted and they heavily fan with their wings. And one group will be fanning the air out of the colony, and the other group will be fanning the air back into the colony. So that allows the bees to exchange the air through the hive and be able to regulate the temperature. But they can only do that if they actually have enough space, or in this case enough ventilation, to be able to pass that air through. So if the entrance is very narrow in summertime, the bees simply struggle to be able to effectively regulate the temperature. So what can you do? You can certainly remove any entrance reducers, and you can also look at using ventilated bottom boards, which also have a different advantage now in a mechanical control for varroa. So there's also other benefits of doing that. So that brings me to diseases that are related to nutrition. So again, this is only going to be a very quick overview. If you may or may not be familiar with those diseases already, if you're not, please do familiarize yourselves with them, because it also is a requirement for meeting biosecurity standards. And of course, it is important in managing these. So just very quick example, at the very top you can see an image of chalk brood. It is a fungal spore that affects developing brood, and then they turn into what we call mummies. In the middle part, you've got nosema, so that is a disease that generally affects adult bees, and it can cause dysentery in bees, so it affects their guts and also the way that they can actually take up nutrients, so it affects how they can digest nutrients as well. And then we have European foulbrood, which is a bacteria that affects developing brood, and the brood essentially dies. So have a look at those. And there's also different ways of how you can assist a hive with managing the nutrition so that they can overcome those diseases. So what can beekeepers do? I think we've already kind of touched on that. So one of the most important parts is to find out as much information as you can about your own environment that the bees are in. How are the seasons changing, and really understand what is happening in the environment, and also how the bees are responding to whatever is around. So these are the 2 textbook resources that I can recommend to you today. They are not the only ones, but certainly ones that we have available for you today if you would like to get a copy of them. And with that, I would like to say thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of your day.